This is Katie in Tucson, Arizona, and you're listening to Scandal Water,
where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
Well, we are heading into a really, really big episode today.
Yes.
Yes. As you guys know, this is our final episode of our April Gone Too Soon theme. And goodness, we are talking about somebody just, I don't even know. Beloved, worldwide sensation. Somebody who touched the world, somebody who changed the world. I mean, this is big. We are talking about Princess Diana today. But I'm actually going to start with a much more current topic.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts about the recent hoopla over Kate Middleton's disappearance from the public? And then of course we found out why that was.
Well, you and I had an off mic talk about this at the Milan Miracle event. And I am not saying that I agree with this at all, but I think they could have circumvented all of this hoopla had they just released a statement earlier saying this. Just here it is. Let's bring awareness to the topic. Let's be upfront about it and end the speculation, period. I think that a lot of the palace PR has been say nothing, show nothing, tell nothing. And I don't know that you can do that in today's world. Maybe in the previous world where there was limited information, you know, you could control the information better. Now everybody has a cell phone. Everybody can investigate whatever you put out and they can figure out, well, that photo was faked. Here's the Photoshop. We can run it through AI. We can see where you're tricking us. And the public craves honesty and they don't like it when you lie to them. So even if you're lying by omission, and yes, she absolutely is entitled to her privacy, but you got to say what's going on. And then now everybody's left them alone pretty well. They've said, here's what's going on. Now they're being left alone.
Oh, I think they were shamed a little bit. People had gotten pretty ugly.
Yeah, they had.
And I mean, I take a slightly different perspective on this. I really come at this from a very personal angle, and I'm an introverted person. I'm pretty personal, pretty private, and I'm thinking about this young mother and wife who received the most devastating news, and they did try to circumvent it. To my mind, they said she's recovering from surgery. She will be out of the public eye until this time. Like, they tried to communicate to the public and say she needs time. She needs privacy.
Yeah.
And she was not allowed. I mean,
I know,
it got crazy. It got crazy what people were saying about her just because she was trying to deal with it.
I think what ramped it up is if they had waited until they said, we're going to let you know after Easter, then just keep it that way. But then they released that photo.
Yeah, the Photoshop thing would put it over the top.
The top, and that's what made everything go nuts and made everybody start going, okay, now wait a minute. We weren't really worried about it. It was kind of fun little, hey, where's Kate? And now it's, wait a minute, seriously, where is Kate? And then releasing the thing a couple days later where it was a lady that didn't really look like her, and then the lady in the car where the bricks were different. It's just like, come on, guys, let's just say what's going on, you know?
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I think we probably have different perspectives. I'm not sure if some of those other pictures were fake or if they were people getting, you know, kind of these from a distance pictures, but I still struggle with it because I don't think it was fun. I don't think if I were the person being talked about who's over here trying to deal with cancer, a cancer diagnosis and chemotherapy to deal with treating it, I don't think it would be fun that everybody was saying my husband was having an affair or that he had murdered me or that I might be dead and that they're trying to hide it. I don't think that's fun. I feel like that's pretty concerning. And also if their children are seeing things that are being said about them, that's concerning to me as a mother. You know, I wouldn't want that.
It's all horrible.
It is.
It's all horrible. And it's, you know what? It's also, we've talked about this off and on. It's like, is this the price of fame? Is this the price of, okay, you can either have a private life or you can become the future queen. And this is the exchange that you have to make. You know, everybody wants their private life, but you exchange it for, well, you could have had that, but you chose this life. You knew what you were giving up. And again, not saying I agree with it. I think everybody's entitled to privacy, but I think the public perception is you don't get that anymore to a certain extent.
And that brings me to the reason for even bringing this up, because what has come out through this sensationalism over Kate's disappearance and then
Which we had chosen this topic before this happened. How many times has this happened to us?
I know. But something that people have pointed out are the parallels between what Kate is experiencing compared to what Princess Diana went through. And both of them, more so, I think Diana, once she came into the picture, even in terms of engagement, and especially after she became Charles's wife, I think she was always the most popular royal from that point on.
For sure.
I think Kate and William sometimes go back and forth a little bit, but she is often in the polls the most popular royal. And Harry's popular, or he was more so when he was still in the royal family.
I think I read somewhere that when they got married, it was the first case of a commoner coming into the aristocracy in like 350 years.
Oh, really?
I did not realize that she was a commoner.
I didn't either.
Yeah, she was.
Okay.
According to the source that I cannot tell you that I read on the internet a long time ago.
But regardless, here we have these two women who the public is just fascinated with, who we've just discussed the fact that it comes with a price. They are also dealing with invasion of their privacy. They are dealing with people trying to catch them and take photos of them in their most private moments when they think that they are alone or they think that they're, with their family, whatever the case may be. These are situations that both of these women have been through.
Yep.
And so I thought that would be a good way to start because it gets us thinking, I think, in a real way. Princess Diana passed a long time ago, but these situations are still happening.
Yes. Isn't that one of the reasons why Harry said he left the...
Absolutely, to protect his wife.
And
from
children.
This. Yeah, and children. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will ask you this. Have you been interested in the royals? Is that something that you've always been interested in?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm interested in them as a concept. I was very interested in Henry VIII and his wives. And besides Henry VIII and his wives, and then the people we have now, I don't really know a lot about the in-betweens, but I'm interested in them as far as the aristocracy and what it is. But I don't know a lot about them, so I'm not a person that could tell you, well, this and this and this and this about them. But yes, I am interested in them.
So almost a historical slant.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree. I am interested from the historical slant. I watched The Crown, but I think I've always been interested in them from a more, I don't know what the term would be. Imaginative slant. I was thinking about this driving in. I'm like, why is it we are so fascinated? And I think it's because from the time you are a toddler, you are hearing fairy tale stories that involve princesses and princes and queens and kings and, all the royal people. And then you watch all the Disney movies.
Sure.
They're everywhere. And in your mind as a young child, it's nothing but wonderful. These are people who are important. Their lives are fantastical. Right. It is fantasy. I mean, like you think of it as being just magical.
Yeah.
And you don't know when you're young the price that comes with it, the negative aspects, the really hard, awful parts of it, because now we know that. Right. But I think it makes you very interested because as a commoner, to use your word, they're so far removed from us. Now we want to see, well, what is their life like?
Right.
What are they going through?
Right. I never really wanted to be a prince or a princess watching all that stuff. I just wanted the library in
Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast. I didn't really care about the whole prince thing. I don't want to be the princess of the castle. Can I have your library?
I love it. Well, moving into this episode on Princess Diana, I will tell you, I was a person who was very interested in her. I remember exactly where I was when I learned of her passing.
I think I do too. I was at the house I grew up in, my mom's house, in my bedroom. I think I was in my bedroom watching the actual funeral. I don't know about remembering where I was when I heard she passed, but I remember watching the funeral up in my bedroom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we were in Gatlinburg. And if anyone knows my husband, he is a man of traditions. So we have literally been on a trip to Gatlinburg every year that we have been married. And so this particular year, I think we were either coming in or out of a restaurant. And it was back when you used to see newsstands in front of businesses all the time. Oh. And I think it was Kirk who actually looked over and saw a headline about her being in a car crash. Oh. And I couldn't believe it. It did not feel like this could be real.
With all the stuff that had been happening at the time, it still felt like this couldn't be real.
It did, to me it did, because for
Yeah.
one thing, I wasn't keeping up with all the
Okay.
ins and outs. I mean, she just seemed like this larger than life persona that was beloved worldwide. And so to me, it was like, how could something this awful happen to somebody who is so famous, so beloved, and literally has bodyguards charged with protecting her?
Right.
You know, but regardless, when I went into this episode, I'm very interested because I've always admired her, been interested in her. I watched The Crown and just finished it very recently.
Is it done? Is that show
Yes,
done?
yes.
Oh, I gotta watch that. I started watching the first couple seasons and then I fell off because, work and life. But I'd
Right.
like to finish that.
You should. Well, as I was researching, I have been through so many sources, including interviews, including one source that I'm going to reference quite a bit, Diana in Her Own Words by National Geographic, which I found on Amazon Prime. I even watched Diana the musical on Netflix.
What? Was it good?
It was kind of camp. It was a little campy. Like, it
Okay.
was fun to watch.
But did they mean it to be campy?
I'm not sure. The
Okay.
reviews are mixed.
Okay.
Some said it was meant to be and that it was fun, and some absolutely blasted it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which
Proceed
way.
with caution.
Yes. But I found the source, Diana in Her Own Words, to be very informative, because the whole thing basically is nothing but her words
Yeah.
and photos or news archives, news footage that was recorded about her and her life throughout her entire time here on Earth.
Okay.
So here's something that Rolling Stone said explaining the premise behind all this. Quote, perhaps the most famous book about the royal family was Andrew Morton's 1992 biography about Princess Diana. Released to much fanfare in the UK, it quickly became a #1 bestseller both in Europe and across the pond in the US, with readers rapturously diving into the details of Diana's unhappy marriage to Prince Charles and her rocky relationship with the press. Both Diana and Morton originally denied the princess's involvement in the book, with the author insisting that his sources were simply Diana's family members and friends. But after her death in 1997, Morton revealed that the Princess of Wales had given secret interviews to a middleman for the biography. Morton even released some of the recorded conversations on tape.
I was going to say, how could he prove that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The book title was soon revised to add In Her Own Words
Okay.
to the original title, acknowledging that Diana had been a willing participant in the biography's publication. So in this 2017 documentary, what we are hearing are excerpts from those recordings
okay.
when she was being interviewed by this friend using Andrew Morton's questions as he was gathering material for the book. So you are hearing her talk. It is straight from her.
wow.
It is like you are sitting with her having this casual conversation. And to me, it was powerful. And then the words on the screen at the beginning of the documentary say, in 1991, inside London's Kensington Palace, Princess Diana sits down for a series of secret interviews. Most of this unique series of interviews has never been broadcast before. They show Diana's state of mind at one of the lowest points of her marriage and represent one side of the story, her side of the story. And that is important to remember. This is 100% coming from Diana herself. So as I give quotes throughout this, we have to remember this is her perspective. I'm sure other people might have a different perspective. But I thought, since this is a tribute to her,
Yeah.
and it's about her, I think
Let's hear from her.
we need to hear her voice. I'm going to start at the beginning. She was born on July 1st, 1961 to John and Frances Spencer. And they were, you already brought this up, they were an aristocratic family. So
She was
they
not a
were-
commoner.
She was not a commoner. Their connections, that family's connections to the royal family, went way, way, way back. There were lots of little connections. I'll just give you this one. Queen Elizabeth actually attended the wedding of Diana's parents and was godmother to Diana's younger brother. So that's how
Interesting.
they're connected.
That's super connected.
Yeah. Diana sometimes even played with Charles's younger brothers. So there were 5 children in the Spencer family: Sarah, Jane, John, who passed away when he was just a few hours old, then Diana, and the youngest brother, Charles. While Diana was born at Park House, after her grandfather passed away in 1975, that's when her father became Earl Spencer. So that's when they came into that title. That's when she became Lady Diana. And that's when the family moved to Althorpe Estate, which was the beautiful Spencer home that had been in the family for over 500 years and sits on approximately 13 or 1,500 acres, depending on the source.
Yeah, not a bad
Not a
inheritance.
bad gig, right? But Despite their wealth and privilege, things were not easy for the Spencers. Diana's parents separated in 1967. They actually fully divorced in 1969. And most of the sources that I saw put a lot of blame on the mom, Frances, saying that she basically kind of abandoned the kids. She fell in love with another man, somewhat ran off with him. There was an ugly custody battle, though, where Frances's own mother ended up testifying on behalf of Diana's dad, who did gain custody of the children.
That's rough when
Yeah. Well, this meant two things to Diana. First, because her two older sisters were older and were away at boarding school, it meant that while she was living at Althorpe, Diana and her younger brother Charles spent a lot of time together and they got really close. It also meant they spent a lot of time under the care of nannies. That was kind of something that affected her, how she was brought up in that situation with nannies, a lot of isolation, spent a lot of time with her brother. The other thing was she had to go back and forth on visits sometimes to her mom, and that affected her. In fact, she talks briefly about the impact of her parents' divorce in that interview. I'll let you hear what she said.
I mean, it was a very unhappy childhood. Parents were busy sorting themselves out. Always seeing our mother crying. Daddy never spoke to us about it. We could never ask questions. Too many changeover of nannies. Very unstable, the whole thing. I just remember being generally unhappy and being very detached from everybody else.
How did you first learn about the divorce?
I remember seeing my father slap my mother across the face, and I was hiding behind the door, and she was crying. And I remember Mummy cried an awful lot. Every Saturday, when we went up for weekends, every Saturday night, standard procedure, she'd start crying on Saturday. And we both see her crying. What's the matter, Mummy? Oh, I don't want you to leave tomorrow. Which, for a 9-year-old, was devastating.
That's sad when it's standard procedure for mom to cry on Saturdays.
Yeah, I thought that was very, very disturbing, actually, especially the part, too, about her father slapping her mother. But the interesting thing is that that's one of the few times that I could see any criticism of her father. Most everything else I saw sounded like he was the parent who was actually much more stable and loving to them. An interesting side note is just within the past few weeks, a BBC article came out about Charles Spencer's new book, A Very Private School. That's her younger brother, remember? And in that book, he reportedly tells about the violence and sexual abuse he suffered as a young boy at boarding school. And during an interview promoting the book, he shared stories about, while not at boarding school, while at home, different nannies that took care of the Spencer children in their home were cruel to them.
Aww.
And he actually gave an example of how one particular nanny would punish Diana and him by knocking their heads together.
No, stop.
If they were caught misbehaving at the same time. And in that same BBC article, it said, quote, Earl Spencer, one of the most prominent aristocrats in the country, said, quote, damaging violence to children affects them, whatever family they are born into. So you heard her start that clip by saying it was an unhappy childhood. She may have had this beautiful home. She may have had wealth and privilege, but she was struggling with a lot.
Don't we hear that all the time, though?
Absolutely.
All the time.
And I think it's also one of the reasons, it is one of the reasons, because she said it, that she wanted to make sure that when she was a mother, she tried to give her children the most stable, loving situation she could. So going back to her childhood and her upbringing, a little interesting side note is that her father, Earl Spencer, remarried in 1976 to a woman named Rain McCorkadale without telling his children.
What?
Yeah, it wasn't like things were peaches and roses here.
Yeah.
She was very angry. In fact, when Diana found out, she was so upset that she recollected in a memory that she talked about that she actually was so mad she smacked her father across the face.
Whoa.
And she and her sisters in particular really disliked their stepmother. They called her Acid Rain for many years. But in Diana's later years, when her own marriage was falling apart and she was estranged from her mother, she reportedly grew a lot closer to Rain and would often turn to Rain to kind of vent with her or talk with her. And I don't know if I've said this, Rain was the daughter of Barbara Cartland, who writes the romance novels.
I don't know that person.
Yeah,
What
she's
romance
like,
novel?
well, I think she might be, I don't know if they're Harlequin romances, but
Oh,
they would be
really?
along those lines.
Oh.
She is a romance novel writer.
Okay.
Okay. So, although Diana did not love school, she was very athletic, had a lot of other interests as well. She was a swimmer, a skier, a tennis player, a pianist, and so much more. Above all, what she wanted to do was to become a ballerina. However, they commented that at 5'10",
She was too tall.
she didn't have the typical build. Yes, it really just wasn't in her cards. She was only 16 years old when Prince Charles, who was nearly 13 years older, first visited her family's West Northamptonshire estate, Althorpe, in November of 1977. At the time, he was dating her older sister, Lady Sarah.
What?
You didn't know that?
Nope.
Yeah, they were friends for ages and reportedly only dated briefly, like depending on the source.
Him and the older sister?
Sarah,
Okay.
yes. And some sources even said the reason for their breakup was because Sarah talked too much to the press. Yes. But
Just wait.
but most of the sources seem to agree they only dated briefly. They really didn't hit it off, but it was during this time that he did come to the house for, I think it was a grouse hunt, and they crossed paths. In fact, Diana commented in the documentary that during this visit, quote, "My sister was all over him like a bad rash." And she goes on to say that she tried to stay out of the way, but that they did have this brief interaction when he spoke to her and asked if Diana would show him the gallery, which struck her. She commented that she was just amazed someone like him would pay attention to her.
Oh my goodness.
Now, I did not find this. I could not back this up with sources, but there were a few mentions to Diana having a crush on Charles when she was younger.
Really?
And possibly even have like pictures of him on her wall or in her
Really?
room. So I can imagine if I were 16 years old.
The future king of England.
Right. Showed me a little attention. I would probably like
But
that.
now when I know, I'd be like, no, run. The future king of England pays me a little attention. I'll be like, nope, sorry.
No, thank you. So in 1981, when they were giving an engagement interview, Charles and Diana were asked about their first meeting, and Charles commented, "I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. I mean, great fun. Bouncy and full of life and everything." So about a year later, this was another thing that Diana said she really noticed. There was Charles's 30th birthday party that was coming up, and not only her sister Sarah, but she received an invitation.
How does Sister Sarah feel about this, what's about to happen?
Well, she said that Sarah literally asked, well, why is he inviting you?
Yeah.
And she said, I don't know, but I want to go. And so she went.
Okay.
And again, Diana shares that they crossed paths occasionally over the next 2 years because they're in the same circles a little
Sure.
bit. And so, you know, his friendship with her sister helped with that. But it was in 1980, when she was 19 years old, that they actually had this conversation when they crossed paths and they connected. Charles started inviting her for walks.
I'm assuming he's already broken up with Sarah at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Sarah was a very brief thing in 1977.
Okay,
That's
okay.
long gone. Yes, they're just friends.
Okay.
But he would sometimes ask her if she wanted to come to Buckingham Palace for a visit. By September, their courtship had officially begun. But something that comes up is this was, by the time they were engaged, they'd only had like 8 or 10 dates.
Yeah.
This was very
fast.
Very fast. It was also not super intense. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, come over, let's go on a walk. And then we'll 2 weeks later, let's have another
let's sign the
walk.
paperwork.
Yeah, right. So it was very interesting. They also said that she passed the Balmoral test, which means that when they were considering her as someone who could potentially be engaged to Charles, she had to pass approval. She had to pass muster. So she spent a week at Balmoral Castle with the Queen and other important members of the royal family to see if they thought she was suitable, and she did get their approval. So once the press got wind of the couple's romance, Diana started getting hounded by the press. I think we've all seen the footage where literally you see her walking out of, she was basically a teacher's aide.
Yeah.
And you see her walking out of her workplace and they're just following her, throwing questions at her. One guy, she literally goes, watch out, because we can't see him, but he's been walking backwards filming her and he's about to run into something.
Gosh.
So hounded. They took pictures of her with the kids. They would take pictures of her. She had a strategy for trying to lose them at red lights because it was so bad. But Diana shared that even though the experience was terrible and that she had no idea how to deal with it, because here she was.
And that wasn't a red flag to her to go get out?
Well, she's 19 years old.
And she likes the guy.
She loves him. Yeah. But she said that even though this is terrible, she doesn't know how to deal with it. She said no one was helping her.
That should have been another red flag.
Right. From her perspective, she said Charles was no help at all. I mean, everybody had to know it because it was all over the news. That's all you saw. But she even commented, telling a story about this time when they were on the phone, and Charles commented about his poor friend Camilla having reporters outside her home. And Diana said, I asked, how many? And he said, 4. And she said, I thought to myself, 4? I have 30 everywhere I go.
Wow.
She was seeing some red flags, but she was this young, naive girl who was in love with this man. And also, I mean, I'm sure it was exciting that he's a royal and this is the life she's moving into. Meanwhile, many sources allude to the idea that Charles was being pressured to marry. In fact, a biography written about him in 2017 says that, whether this is true or not, it was his perception that Charles's father was almost bullying him into it. He said that Prince Philip had sent a letter that said, you either need to propose or let this girl go, because...
But they haven't been dating that long. What's his...
Not. He was in the press a lot. He's over 30.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's following him.
Pick somebody.
Yes, it was a matter of pick somebody.
But he had picked somebody. He wanted to marry Camilla, but was she already married at this time?
She was married.
That's it.
She was married at this time, yes. Both Diana herself in her interviews and also a few news clips about this situation from, that were recorded back in that time talked about what a great candidate Diana made, because she had the aristocratic background. She had the right personality or demeanor for the role.
The looks.
She had no previous boyfriends. So it was such a double standard that Prince Charles could be doing whatever, but they wanted her to have no past that could emerge.
Yep.
So she had kept she literally said, I felt like something better was coming. I would not have a boyfriend. So that actually was something that they paid attention to. And literally, this shows you what the time period was like. I literally heard them say on a news report that it was useful that she was so young because of childbearing.
Oh, gosh.
I know. There was also, I did not literally see this in print, but it's something that you heard talked about a lot, the inference that because she was so shy and demure, everyone likely thought she would be very compliant and easy to control. No trouble at all. Right. Now, she says in the interviews that she already had suspicions about Camilla Parker Bowles and Charles even before the proposal, but she thought he was like the fact that they had a relationship in the past, that they had been in love in the past. But she thought that Charles was very much in love with her. They announced their engagement on February 24th, 1981. And this is when, remember, very famously, a reporter asked Charles if they were in love, and he famously said, whatever in love means. Oh, God. She said that wasn't a red flag for her. She just thought that was his wry sense of humor, and said that he had actually made that same joke during the proposal when she had said she loved him, and he came back with, I love you too, whatever that means kind of thing.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So at this point, once the proposal was announced, the harassment from the press has escalated.
Off the charts.
Absolutely. And this is where she said she is struggling. She doesn't know any of the protocols of being a royal. Nobody's really teaching her.
Really? Even though she grew up in that lifestyle?
Well, I think it's different. I mean, I'm sure
a royal is different than
right. I mean, you even have rules
crust.
about how to hold your handbag.
Yeah.
Or whether or not you're supposed to have your handbag. I mean,
if you're the queen, you do. You carry that with you everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, there are rules about everything. And so she's trying to get caught up, and she said it was just so hard, and nobody understands and nobody's helping her. And then she shared that she had started to feel like there were some red flags. It wasn't as though, I didn't get the impression that she thought that Charles and Camilla were having an actual affair at this time, but it was an emotional affair.
Yeah.
And she was concerned about their relationship.
Yeah.
That came out very clear, to the point that she even told about saying to her sisters, I don't know about this, I'm concerned. And one of them said, too late to chicken out now, your face is already on the tea towels.
I wonder if it was Sarah that said it.
It might have been. It wasn't as though she went towards this wedding with no reservations.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah.
She was questioning things. And she is a 19, 20 by the time she's married. She's a 19 or 20-year-old girl who's dealing with all of this. Which is why she starts to tell about her experiences with bulimia. She said that she really started struggling with this at this time because of all this pressure, this stress that she's going through. I'm going to play a clip for you. It's about a minute long, slightly less. You're first going to hear a tiny piece of a news clip and then her voice.
Okay.
Sarah Spencer was there to give a sister's opinion of the wedding dress. It's been slightly altered. The crowd saw that, like most brides, Lady Diana has lost weight as the day approaches.
The bulimia started the week after we got engaged. My husband put his hand on my waistline and said, "Oh, a bit chubby here, aren't we?" And that triggered off something in me. And I remember the first time I made myself sick, I was so thrilled. Because I thought, right, this is the release, the tension. The first time I got measured for my wedding dress, I was 29 around the waist. The day I got married, I was 23 and a half.
Oh, gosh.
I'd shrunk into nothing.
Obviously, she feels like Charles played a huge, the situation she was in, but also Charles, she said he made that comment about her being chubby. So all of those things together, she felt really contributed to, she had a terrible battle with it. She talked about it a lot in the interviews, which she was applauded for, because I don't know if you remember this. You were so young at this time, I'm sure you don't, but I don't think there was a lot of talk, people openly talking about eating disorders before this time. And so she really kind of normalized being able to share what you're going through in your struggles so that you can try to get some help.
Right. Because
we're gonna hear it was just a terrible battle for her. Just share just a little bit more about that. She said that the night before her wedding, she suffered a terrible fit of bulimia. That was how she phrased it. And she said she was eating everything to the point that her sister thought it was funny. Like she didn't like her sister didn't realize. She was laughing about it, like, "Oh, you're eating everything because you're so nervous." She said nobody realized at the time what was actually going on. It was very hush hush. But she said the next morning she woke up and felt deathly calm. Those were her words, commenting, quote, "I felt I was a lamb to the slaughter, and I knew it."
Yikes.
So she did not go into the wedding feeling nothing but joy.
Yeah.
Although there was some joy. They were married July 29th, 1981 at London St. Paul's Cathedral with an estimated 750 million people around the world watching.
I was not. I was one.
You were not. People called it the wedding of the century. Different news reports talked about how hopeful this was in terms of bringing young blood into the royal family. Right. This was a time when the royal family was declining in popularity pretty
Which is another
heavily.
reason they wanted him to get married.
100%. But Diana looking back on it reflectively, she called it the worst day of my life. But different times she also said that on that actual day, she said she felt very calm, and there were things about it she did enjoy. She specifically remembered seeing Camilla at the wedding. As she was walking down the aisle, she said she looked over and saw her, and I believe she commented on seeing her young son beside her standing on the chair or something. But she had a quote. She said she thought to herself, "Well, there we are. That's it. Let's hope that's all over with." She said she couldn't take her eyes off her husband. She was very in love with him, and she loved how everyone was happy because they thought she and Charles were happy. She said in the interview that she gave, "I had this tremendous hope in me that was slashed by day 2.
Oh, goodness.
I know, but you know what? She laughed as she said it.
Yeah.
She was kind of like,
there it went.
Yeah, there it went. She commented that even on the honeymoon, she just didn't feel like he was into her. He took 8 novels, and she said she thought they were going to spend a lot of time alone, but when they had opportunities to be alone, he wanted to read. And then other times, everybody was around him. And she also noticed he had new cufflinks with intertwined C's. And when she said, "Oh, is that Camilla and Charles?" he admitted it and said, "What's wrong with a gift from a friend?" So that led to a fight, and she commented that her bulimia was so severe that she was eating and getting sick 4 times a day on the yacht.
Goodness.
Yeah. By October, she was in a terrible way. She was not sleeping. She was sick. She was struggling with depression to the point that, they were taking her to doctors. I don't think they knew what was wrong, but they were taking her to doctors who prescribed Valium. But she said nobody really knew how to help her. But then she realized she was pregnant with William. William, which she said was a godsend to her in terms of, giving her something hopeful. And you know what? Why don't we stop there on a hopeful note and take our break, because it's not going to be pretty when we come back.
Downhill fast. You know, Candy, all this talk of the British aristocracy and royals makes me think of knights and their swords. But do you know the one thing that is mightier than the sword? Pens. And you know who now has pens? Us. So basically, we're mightier than the British aristocracy. Listen, I don't make the rules. I just report them.
Even better, they put the fun in functional, exactly like our podcast. You can purchase your very own Scandal Water pen for $4 a la carte, or receive one as a bonus when you sign up to become a member through Buy Me a Coffee. You can do both of those things at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com.
Cheers!
All right, and we're back. So again, we left off. She was pregnant with William. Unfortunately, it wasn't an easy pregnancy. She was sick the whole time with morning sickness as well as bulimia. And she commented that because the royal family had never suffered with morning sickness, they didn't understand that was something that the family apparently didn't normally go through. So she said every time she had to step out of an engagement to be sick or she had some kind of an issue, she felt as though the family was registering, Diana's a problem. She's different. So she's feeling this, she just feels
otherness.
No sense.
She's already feeling the otherness.
Yes, no sense of belonging at all. And to give you an idea of how badly she was struggling, she shares in the interview that while she was pregnant with William, she actually shared that she threw herself down the stairs.
Oh, no.
Like, this is how badly she was struggling, and this is while she was pregnant. But she felt like she was so young, she was so mentally unhealthy, and she felt like nobody believed her that she needed help, and she wasn't getting any. So William was born June 21st, 1982, and then Diana had severe postnatal depression. She is not quite 21 at this time. The couple went on a 6-week royal tour together, and this is where Diana first started noticing Charles's jealousy of all the attention she's receiving. This adds another layer to her stress, because something that she mentions time and time again is how it seemed as though they expected her to just adapt overnight to this whole new world and all the expectations that were placed on her. No training, no mentorship. So it was kind of ironic to her that while she seemed to have figured it out and everybody loves her, now she's having to deal with jealousy over it because Charles...
Now you're doing it too well.
Right. She felt that he could not stand it, that she was front page news everywhere they went, and she was so beloved, and he was not as popular. To add to that, she seemed to believe that the royals... There were so many protocols and she was breaking them, and she got the impression that they thought she just wanted attention. Like they didn't really believe she needed the help, that she was really that mentally unhealthy. They thought Diana wants attention. She also addressed the fact that this eating disorder, it was so unknown to everybody, even her own family members. She said they didn't know at the time. They didn't help her at the time. Nobody. She said it was later when her sisters and different family members really understood the bulimia and everything that she'd been going through, that they felt some blame towards Charles for not supporting her as her husband. They felt like he should have been the first line of defense for her. But her comment was, even they at the time didn't get it. It was very secretive, and so she was just out there by herself. So in a very famous televised interview she gave in 1995, she elaborated a little bit more on her struggle with bulimia, saying, quote, "It was a symptom of what was going on in my marriage. I was crying out for help but giving the wrong signals, and people were using my bulimia as a coat on a hanger. They decided that was the problem. Diana was unstable. The cause was the situation where my husband and I had to keep everything together because we didn't want to disappoint the public, and yet obviously there was a lot of anxiety going on within our four walls." So they're trying to say, okay, now everything is because of this that she's dealing with, and nobody's really getting it. So with all this inner turmoil going on, she had something wonderful happen. Harry was born September 15th, 1984, but despite the fact that their family was growing, the marriage problems were only getting worse. According to a Vogue article, by 1986, both were reportedly participating in extramarital affairs. In 1994, Charles told his official biographer, Jonathan Dimbleby, that he picked things back up with Camilla Parker Bowles. Meanwhile, it's alleged that Diana's affair with Army Captain James Hewitt started around this time, and rumors of their troubled marriage began to appear in the press. So with both of them reportedly seeing other people in 1986, Diana remembers calling Camilla out for her affair with Charles at one point. She asked to speak to her during an engagement, and here's what she said. I was terrified of her. I said, I know what's going on between you and Charles and just want you to know that. She said to me, you've got everything you ever wanted. All the men in the world fall in love with you, and you've got 2 beautiful children. What more would you want? So I said, I want my husband.
Yeah.
So the affair started with the Army Captain James Hewitt after they met at a party in Connecticut. Again, this is still in 1986. Their affair reportedly began after she started taking riding lessons with him. You know, that was something they had talked about at the party, apparently. And after the lessons started, they started a relationship. And it continued through 1991 when he was deployed to serve in the Gulf War. He took a lot of criticisms for giving a tell-all. He did? Yes. He wrote about it. He talked about it. He had a tell-all memoir that reportedly sold for millions of dollars. And he said if Charles hadn't cheated, Diana wouldn't have. That's something that Diana said too. She admitted the affair with James in 1995. And there were rumors of other relationships with other people during the marriage as well. I never could find corroboration.
Yeah.
But Diana seemed to always maintain that she wanted her marriage to work, but couldn't because of Charles's ongoing emotional and then also physical affair with Camilla.
Is Camilla the only person that he stepped out with?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know that.
It seems to be the most consistent.
That's the
long-term.
Everybody believes he was in love with her well before he married Diana. And so Diana famously told the BBC in 1995, quote, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Yeah.
It was in the later part of the 80s that Diana started her humanitarian work. For example, in 1987, she opened Britain's first AIDS ward in London, which only cared for patients with the AIDS virus. And that is where she very famously shook hands with AIDS patients without gloves. And she did that so purposefully because at that time, there was the belief that you could pass the virus by touch.
Yes.
And so she was the first high-profile celebrity to do that.
Yes.
And it was very purposeful. She was the patron of a leprosy mission till her death in 1997. And there, she was really also trying to dispel the myth that it could be spread by touch. So she was filmed in 1989 shaking hands with and touching the bandaged wounds of leprosy patients on her first visit to Indonesia, according to this one source. But the one cause I think that people think about most often with Diana is the landmines. Shortly before she died in 1997, she visited Bosnia and Angola, where she was pictured picking her way through a minefield in the southern African country while wearing a visor and a bomb-proof vest. And she said, quote, I'd read the statistics that Angola has the highest percentage of amputees anywhere in the world, that 1 person in every 333 had lost a limb, most of them through landmine explosions. But that hadn't prepared me for reality. And so she said when she was there in person and she saw all these people who had been harmed by it, she was determined that she wanted to help. So the Halo Trust, which cleared the minefield that Diana walked through, has now removed more than 92,000 landmines, 800 minefields, and 162,000 shells, bombs, and missiles since her death. And she was part of making sure that happened. One last thing here before we move towards the sad part. An interesting point is how complicated Diana's relationship was with the press, and it was something that was brought out in a Smithsonian article that I read. It was so interesting that they said she was hounded by them. She literally told a London reporter at one time, she held her composure so often, but at one point she broke down and yelled at this man and said, you make my life hell. So on the one hand, she was miserable about what they were doing to her. But on the other, she knew how to use the power of the press for a cause. When she was trying to do something to help people, she knew how to do it. She literally sometimes, she got the photographers to take the pictures of her shaking hands with the AIDS patients or the leprosy patients. She sometimes would say, did you get that? And if they didn't get the film,
she'd redo
it.
Well, I think it was on her terms. When she's out doing philanthropy work, yes, take the pictures, but just leave my private life alone. Let's have some boundaries here.
Absolutely. So in 1991, when her affair was ending, Diana's personal life was a mess. This is something they actually brought out in The Crown, if you've seen that. She did believe that she was being spied on. She believed she was being misrepresented by the royal family. She felt like they had way too much control over her life. It was very concerning to her. And so this is around the time when she decided she was going to participate in Andrew Morton's Princess Diana biography, where she would tell what was really happening. Yes. Now, Andrew Morton, talking about this, said this: Diana had a nagging fear that at any moment her palace would have her classified as mentally ill and locked away. Where to turn? It had dawned on her that unless the full story of her life was told, the public would never understand the reasons behind anything she decided to do. So she did not agree to meet with him directly. She was too concerned she would get caught, but they had a go-between who came and interviewed her, as we said. And here's what Andrew Morton said when he got the first tapes back. Turning on my tape recorder, I listened with mounting astonishment to the unmistakable voice of Princess Diana pouring out a tale of woe in a rapid stream of consciousness. She was talking about her unhappiness, her sense of betrayal, her suicide attempts, and two things I'd never previously heard of: an eating disorder called bulimia nervosa and a woman called Camilla. Oh. This is where it all came out. So the 1992 publication of that book, Diana, Her True Story, had huge ramifications.
Yeah.
Publishing sensation, translated into 29 languages, sold 5 million copies around the world. That was number one ramification. But number two was, even though he maintained she had no part in helping him write that book, this effectively signaled the end of the royal marriage.
Oh, yeah.
It was December of 1992 that it was announced the couple had separated. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Buckingham Palace said they were not planning divorce, that they were just going to be separated and go on with their royal events, sometimes together. But you can imagine how that was going.
Yeah.
So it was not much longer, actually January of 1993, that the famous audio recordings between Prince Charles and Camilla were leaked and the transcripts were published in the British tabloids. Do you remember that?
I think so.
Oh, it was bad.
Salacious?
Yes, very salacious. Very salacious. They'd actually been recorded back in December of 1989 when both couples were still with their spouses, and there were some things that were very sensational, and there was definitely outright declarations of love. So it was a huge royal scandal, and it was also believed to have helped push both of those marriages further.
Toward the end.
Toward the end. And, of course, Prince Charles's reputation took a big hit as a result of the tell-all book and the tape scandal. So he was really focused on trying to rebuild his popularity. So in conjunction with the 25th anniversary of his investiture as Prince of Wales, he agreed to do a TV documentary that aired in 1994. He was trying to build himself back up, but unfortunately for him, he got himself in even more hot water when he basically admitted on TV, on this documentary, that he had had an affair with Camilla. So here's how it went.
How in the world did he do that?
Well, here you go. The interviewer, a well-known journalist named Jonathan Dimbleby, asked him point blank if he tried to be, quote, faithful and honorable when he was married to Lady Di, Princess Diana. And he said, yes, absolutely. And you were? The reporter asked. Yes, Prince Charles answered. And then he kind of paused and said, until it became irretrievably broken down, us both having tried. So they took that as his admitting.
Yeah.
And then they asked a little bit more about Camilla, who he said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically, she's a great friend and she will always be a great friend.
Yeah.
Right. So that was 1994. In 1995 is when Diana gave her infamous interview with the BBC's Martin Bashir. So this is super controversial, okay? To this day. Not just because of what Diana discussed, but because of what they did to get her to give this interview.
Well, they do.
Okay. So this was shown on The Crown. This was represented there. But the reporter tricked first Diana's brother Charles into kind of being the contact to get Diana involved, and then they tricked Princess Di herself in order to convince her to do the interview. And this issue came back up in 2020 when a new investigation into their unethical practices was launched just a few years ago. And her brother Charles was quoted as saying to People magazine, again, just recently, the BBC have yet to apologize for what truly matters here, the incredibly serious falsification of bank statements suggesting that Diana's closest confidants were spying on her for her enemies. That was what led me to talk to Diana about such things. This, in turn, led to the meeting where I introduced Diana to Bashir, the journalist, on September 19th, 1995. This then led to the interview. So this falsification of documents is what got the interview to happen, and they totally tricked them. And in this interview, you want to talk about a tell-all, she told about all of it. She told about everything from her eating disorder to the postpartum depression to Charles's unfaithfulness to her own affair. She talked about all of it. And actually, I'll add one other allegedly deceitful thing they did to try to convince her again of the situation she was in and how everybody around her was doing these terrible things to her. They even showed her a fake abortion receipt to make her believe that her husband and the royal nanny had had an affair that resulted in a pregnancy and abortion.
Why would they do that to her?
To try to convince her to tell. Like you shouldn't protect these people. You should tell exactly what's happening. Tell it. Both Prince William and Prince Harry made statements in 2020 about this. I'm not going to share all of that, but a tiny little piece of what William said talking about his mother Diana was, the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation that I remember from those final years with her. But what saddens me most is that if the BBC had properly investigated the complaints and concerns first raised in 1995, my mother would have known that she had been deceived. She was failed not just by a rogue reporter, but by leaders at the BBC who looked the other way rather than asking the tough questions. Regardless, going back into that timeline, when that interview came out, it was done. In December of 1995, the Queen herself wrote letters to Diana and Charles recommending they go ahead and divorce.
Really?
And that prompted them to go ahead. Charles had asked for it.
It's just a mess. She's like, you guys got to get away from each other.
She was like, this is done.
Yeah.
We are not saving anything by keeping you two together. So Diana agreed. The process took a little while. They were not officially divorced until August of 1996. And that was when they decided her title would not be Her Royal Highness anymore, but that she would be known as Diana, Princess of Wales, and she would continue living at Kensington Palace. And different people close to the couple said that just as they showed it in The Crown, their hostility towards each other, it took a while, but it actually started to subside a little bit after they were divorced. They started focusing more on co-parenting, less on just fighting each other, because at one point it was the War of the Waleses, is what they were calling it. But even before the divorce was official, in fall of 1995, Diana had started dating a man she referred to as Mr. Wonderful. He was a surgeon, and they actually managed to date for a couple of years while keeping it very quiet. He was a heart and lung surgeon, to be specific, but they broke up reportedly because he couldn't deal with the public
her life. Yeah.
He was a very private man. After Mr. Wonderful is when Diana started dating Dodi Fayed, a film producer and the son of billionaire businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed. The couple is believed to have connected in July of 1997 when Dodi's dad invited Diana, William, and Harry for a vacation in Saint-Tropez, and then also invited Dodi. Now, Dodi was in a relationship at the time, but that ended. But in August, then, Diana took another trip on the Fayed yacht, and this is when a paparazzi photograph of Dodi and Diana kissing ran in the Sunday Mirror. So on August 30th, the couple was in Paris together, and Diana spoke on the phone to her boys who were in Scotland. That same day, Dodi bought, they have the receipt to show this, what was believed to be an engagement ring that he was never able to give her, according to inquest documents that came out in 2007. But they have a receipt that shows it was from a jeweler in Paris, and it featured the inscription, which in English means, "Tell me yes." That night, Diana and Dodi had dinner at the Ritz, which was owned by Dodi's father. One of the hotel staff members later commented, they looked like two love-struck teenagers. Although some people say that she wouldn't have accepted the proposal. They don't think that she was actually ready to be engaged.
Yeah.
It was such a fast relationship.
I was going to say, that's real fast.
Right. But this is just what came out as evidence afterwards. The pair were then notified that nearly 30 photographers were waiting outside the Ritz, and they decided they were going to head to Dodi's dad's apartment instead of staying at the hotel. I wonder why. Well, they were going to, by the way, I don't think Dad was there. I think they were just going to use that apartment that he owned.
But why not stay at the hotel and avoid we'll never know.
Well, and I think it had something to do with the paparazzi was all around them. They knew they were there, so they thought this apartment might be a place that was private where nobody knew. And they actually were trying a little secret secret method to get there.
Okay.
They used 3 decoy cars trying to get the photographers to follow the decoy cars. But despite the use of those decoys, apparently didn't work because most of the photographers stayed and actually did see Diana and Dodie get into a car with Dodie's bodyguard and the driver, Henri Paul, and watched them drive away. Well, of course, the paparazzi followed them because, of course, they want a photo. So the driver, who was later found to be drunk, turned into a tunnel trying to evade the photographers, but the vehicle spun quickly out of control while being driven at a speed of 121 miles per hour, it was reported, and it slammed into a support column. A witness later said, quote, "There was this huge, violent, terrifying crash followed by the lone sound of a car horn. Dodie and the driver were both pronounced dead at the scene, while Diana was rushed to the hospital. Doctors tried to restart her heart for hours by cardiac massage and electric shocks, but after they were unable to stop the internal bleeding, they decided to stop, quote, by common consent." The princess was then pronounced dead at nearly 5 a.m. on August 31st. She was 36 years old. Countless conspiracy theories came out after Diana's death. Dodie's dad was one of the most vocal people. He was absolutely convinced that Diana's death was ordered by Prince Philip and that it was carried out by Britain's MI6 to keep her from marrying Dodie, who was a Muslim. He told the Mirror in 1998, quote, "I believe in my heart 99.9% that it was not an accident. That car didn't accidentally crash. There was a conspiracy. I will not rest until I have established exactly what happened." A group of investigators, which included over a dozen senior British Metropolitan police officers, spent 3 years and millions of dollars to determine the cause of Princess Diana's death per the BBC. And in the end, what they came up with was they ruled it a car accident. And they said that it was mainly the result of grossly negligent driving and not a royal conspiracy. Diana's funeral took place on September 6, 1997, and according to the BBC, it was a global event with billions of people watching it. That same day, her body was returned to Althorpe, where she was ultimately laid to rest. I know this episode's going a little long, but I thought maybe we would hear just a few seconds of what her brother Charles said at her funeral.
Of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this: a girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. All over the world, she was a symbol of selfless humanity, a standard bearer for the rights of the truly downtrodden. Someone with a natural nobility who was classless and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. There is no doubt that she was looking for a new direction in her life at this time. She talked endlessly of getting away from England, mainly because of the treatment that she received at the hands of the newspapers. I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister. The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
I actually thought that was so moving what he said.
He got choked up at the end. It kind of moved me.
Armchair psychologist.
I thought that would actually lead us into our armchair because, well, first of all, I mean, that's it. That's how it ended for her, except that I think Diana's life and legacy has gone on in so many ways through her boys, through her service activities and the different causes that she supported, and just through her legacy of who she was as a person. But I want to ask you, what are some of your thoughts?
Gosh, well, I mean, it's the price of, again, it's that price of fame. It's the exchange of fame. And she didn't ask for this, obviously. She grew up in aristocracy and she fell in love with someone and she thought that love is enough. Love is going to take us through this. And as she said, her extreme naivete, she was not prepared for this world. I lean into conspiracy. I love looking at different versions of stuff. So I have opinions on things. I tend to lean toward the father, where he says he doesn't think it was just an accident. There have been people who said they did not rush her to the hospital. It took them about 45 minutes, that she was actually talking to some of the people who arrived on the scene. But setting all that aside, that's not what this is focused about. The focus of this is this woman who entered into something that she was unprepared for, made the absolute best of it that she could, overcame so many obstacles, both internal and external. And in my fan fiction writing of her life, when she entered that tunnel, maybe she didn't pass away. Maybe, let's write our own conspiracy theory, Candy. Let's say that she went into that tunnel and she survived, and somebody took her out the other side, and she is now living in a little cottage on the edge of England somewhere, or maybe the south of France. Let's put her in the south of France. And she's living a life where she can anonymously do good, and she's beloved in her village, and she is able to live the life that she always wanted. That's my fan fiction for her.
It's a lovely dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I think that the story is so moving to me because Diana was both so fantastical, living the life of this princess, touching everything, touching the world, touching fashion, touching pop culture, touching people. And then also she was so real and so vulnerable.
Well, she also lived the fairy tale life in that she was a princess in the tower. She was trapped in the tower. And she also brought a lot of awareness to the reality of royal life.
Did.
And saying, this, you guys see it as a tower of gold, but it's actually gilded. It's just the surface is gold. The rest of this is like cold, hard steel that's keeping us in here. And it's the thing we've talked about this whole over and over in this podcast, is the exchange of, do you want this life? It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, and I think we credit Diana for being the one to open those doors and let us see what's inside. Yeah, I think that she's the one who really allowed us that glimpse inside. So
one thing we didn't mention, I'll mention really quickly, is at the funeral, Elton John changed the words to his Candle in the Wind that he had first written about Marilyn Monroe, and he sang the song, and I think it became like the #1 single in the world at the time.
Wow. Yeah,
I didn't see
that, but I think I remember that.
And it's a parallel that Marilyn and Diana both died at age 36, which is just something we've talked about, the 27 Club before. It's an interesting parallel between their two lives and two women who were hounded.
Well, maybe to end this, we'll bring it full circle. We started by talking about Kate and the current royals and what they're going through, and hearing Diana's brother say that the press was such a foil for her, and that what they did to her life, and that she wanted to protect her boys and he wanted to protect the boys, and now those boys are grown and they're dealing with it themselves. And so I send good thoughts to everyone who's living that life.
Yeah.
We now know what it's really like.
Yeah.
It's not the dream we all thought it was.
No.
So good thoughts to Princess Diana's boys, both of you, William and Harry, sending you all the good wishes. And meanwhile, we say a very sad farewell to your mother, Diana. She touched the world. Cheers to you, Diana.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown,
that's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.